want to start talking about Heathrow, actually. I find this extraordinary where this story is now developing, because since Friday there was tons of criticism that basically Heathrow simply wasn't resilient. And on a fire like this, it was ridiculous that it should have the power, as it were, to cut it down, to chop it down. And now the boss of the National Grid is saying, oh, no, we had not one but two substations available that could have easily been plugged in and given Heathrow all the juice it needed to stay open. What is going on?
Well, there's a blame game going on here. That's what's going on. But if the head of the National Grid is right, then that airport did not have to be closed, which, frankly, it was a international humiliation. One of the most famous airports in the world shut because of a fire in a small substation. Astonishing. 1,300
flights cancelled, 200,000 passengers stranded, and the airline industry, according to The Guardian, will have lost 60 to 70 million pounds.
Some people were halfway across the Atlantic when the flight was turned back. It's amazing.
Just think of the financial and legal claims that will be going on now, with everybody trying to claim against everybody else, which is what will happen. But you've got to discover who was at fault. Right? Why has the fire happened? Is it a lack of investment? Got old substations? But if that happens, if it's true, electricity could have been switched from elsewhere to Heathrow. Why wasn't it? And who would have taken the decision to switch?
It's a pretty small if, though, isn't it? Because this is the head of the National Grid who's making this statement. I'd be minded to believe it. If he goes on the record and says, I'm sorry, we had two substations standing by that we could have plugged in and we could have done it like that.
Did Heathrow know that? Did Heathrow know that? Did National Grid tell them?
If they didn't know it, why didn't they know it?
I don't know the answers, and I think all the questions have to be asked to get the answers, but there's been a catastrophic failure if an airport could have stayed open and it shut. But why did it shut? Did Heathrow know they could have switched the power supplies? Did National Grid tell them? Why didn't National Grid do it
That's
anyway?
The second question. Why didn't the National Grid pick up the phone and say, guys, you can be open for business in 5 minutes?
But also, the fire happened at around midnight. So they
half past 11.
Half past 11. So when very few planes are going to be landing, they had plenty of time to get it sorted. There are some suggestions that the boss of Heathrow went back to bed because he wanted to have a good night's sleep so he could tackle the crisis the next day.
Thomas Waldby went to sleep and left the decision to close Europe's busiest airport to his deputy, Javier Ecave, in the early hours of Friday morning. He'd reportedly been at an event in central London when the power first went out, just before midnight on Thursday night, before going back to the scene. As the extent of the inferno became clear, this is all according to the Sunday Times, senior bosses were split into two gold commands, and it was decided that his command should go to, i.e. him, should go to bed, leaving his deputy in charge. Heathrow spokesperson said, we do not recognise the description of proceedings as set out.
That's a funny denial.
We have a robust crisis protocol.
That's a very weak denial, isn't it?
He went to
what
bed.
stirring leadership that is from the boss of Heathrow. I'm going to bed.
Well, they do mention that we have experienced leaders able to take key decisions having had adequate rest.
He is the boss.
Without compromising passenger or colleague safety by being too tired.
Unbelievable. I cannot... Right, I mean, this is it. Right, if the Daily Mirror wasn't going to appear the following day, I can't believe the editor wouldn't take the decision, the deputy would. If there was some big NHS crisis, I can't believe the head of the NHS crisis wouldn't be involved. If there was some major military issue, I can't believe the head of the army wouldn't be involved. I can't believe they'd all go to bed.
How will this look?
It's Jordan.
How will it look when it gets out that I'm kipping as Heathrow shuts down?
You get your beauty sleep, dear. Well, you know, hundreds of thousands of people's flights are cancelled.
Fiddling while Rome burns and sleeping while Heathrow burns.
Costing the economy tens of millions of pounds.
How could you even get to sleep if you were the boss of Heathrow, knowing that the thing might be shut when you woke up in the morning?
Yes, I mean, exactly.
He should have worked round the clock.
They've not denied he's got... I mean, that's the key in their denial. They have not said he didn't go back to bed.
No, they said he needed adequate rest. But the thing is...
So did pilots who have been diverted elsewhere. So did passengers who were going to face a nightmare.
His salary, apparently, I've just heard in my ear, 3 million last year.
Is it now?
You'd imagine that you could stay up for a few hours, wouldn't you?
Really?
Well, how long it's going to be, 3 million?
Yeah. I think there's going to be a row about this.
Well, speaking of not good looks, what do we make... I find this extraordinary, that the Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, despite all of the stuff about Keir Starmer getting the free tickets to the Taylor Swift concerts, just 3 or 4 weeks ago accepted free tickets worth apparently £600 to a Sabrina Carpenter concert. What's she thinking?
Hasn't she heard of Taylor Swift?
Yeah, I know.
And the scandal?
Why don't these people just pay for their own tickets? In the week when we're going to get the spring statement where we're hearing that we could even have infant school meals, free school meals for every infant school child could be scrapped. And this cabinet is on 160,000 a year. Her husband is a very senior civil servant who she can afford to buy her own.
Is it naivety, or is it just having
nose in the trough? Nose in the trough.
I think what can happen is you can just become removed from reality and how the rest of the world sees you when people are showering you with gifts and you do fancy going to the concert. And I can see she probably now can't just tip up and sit with everybody else because of security issues. I can see that. But that just means as long as you're Chancellor, you can't go. You just have to accept. It may be unfair, but it's better than taking a ticket like that. And, of course, you've just announced $5 billion of welfare cuts. You're going to have disabled people, sick people, ill people really worried about how they're going to live in the future. And then you've taken some expensive tickets. You've got to think how it looks, how it'll look on the front of the Daily Mail or another
She's got form,
newspaper.
though. She's got form because when she was in opposition, she too took money from Wahid Ali for clothes, £7,500.
Which she said she'd never do again.
Which she said she'd never do again, so there was a huge row about that, and quite rightly. But there she is, just a few weeks ago, she's at this concert. Unbelievable. Knowing all this is coming up.
This is the strange thing, is that before the original Freebies row, you know, you can imagine they thought, oh, OK, we don't have to use our own money, we're campaigning for government, you know, or they just get into government and they think, fantastic, we can have the Freebies. But there was a massive scandal about it. So it's not like she hasn't been given a heads up about how this is going to look. I just find it odd that she then, knowing everything that they experienced last summer...
It's tin-eared.
Yes.
And out of touch already.
Yeah.
They've not even been in power a year. People will be furious about this, absolutely furious. £600 is not a vast amount of money, but it is if you can't have your winter fuel allowance or you're worrying about...
We say tin-eared. Maybe she just doesn't care. Maybe she just doesn't care.
I think she cares.
Well, it sounded to me like she knew she was in trouble on that.
She won't be going again. I think we can
but she knows it has to be declared.
Mm.
How did she think she was going to get away with it?
I don't know, but they just do. They just sometimes miss it.
And all the attacks on the Tories being sleazy. All the attacks on the Tories being sleazy. And here they are. They've got their own noses in the trough.
We've just discussed how if you're the head of Heathrow, how can you go to bed in the middle of the night?
How can you sleep on the job?
Yeah, you know, and people just make mistakes, silly mistakes.
Cuts to the civil service, though, are likely to be a bit more popular out there.
Before he starts whinging, it's grown, the civil service has grown by 100,000 since the pandemic.
COVID.
Yeah, so we can't need all those people.
Why has it grown by 100,000 since
COVID? Was the pandemic
because they found they'd cut it so much that when you needed the civil service to keep the country going, which is key public services, you needed people to do that. Now, you say get rid of civil servants. You want to create the impression in people's heads. You want to create the impression
10,000.
Of blokes in bowler hats with umbrellas getting on the 740.
That is how I see it, yeah.
Well, look, right, we're talking about people working in the court system. And we've been discussing week after week how trials are so slow because there are not enough people. We're talking about people in job centres and doing welfare assessments. We're talking about people handling asylum and refugee cases and dealing with the massive
Are you going to keep talking?
That is what we're talking about in civil service.
That's what you're talking about.
You do not like facts. You never do. You never do. You just like smears.
Let's get rid of the 10,000 diverse jobs. It's out, the lot of them. Get rid of them. And there are endless jobs that advertised over the weekend for HR directors on 120, 150,000. Why do we need all these HR directors?
Well, the number of redundancies we're talking about is actually 50,000.
You know, you've got them in the Daily Mail. You know, you've got HR directors in the Daily Mail. You've got diversity people in the Daily Mail. You know why? It's because you've got a diverse workforce and you want everybody to get along, work properly, and you don't want legal challenges. That's why you have
10,000 diverse jobs. It's a complete complete waste of money.
Is it true there are 10,000 diversity officers working in the government?
In the NHS, across the civil service,
OK.
10,000. It's a lot.
Meanwhile, what they will not be cutting, apparently, is money spent on migrants, because the Treasury has admitted that migrants will be housed in hotels and temporary accommodation for years to come.
They were getting rid of those hotels. Do you remember?
It was a manifesto pledge, I think.
It was a promise at the election.
But a document published by the Office for Value for Money Wonder how many people work there.
That's a new quango set up by the Chancellor.
It was.
I
Said
love these things.
global instability meant the use of hotels is likely to continue. The government pledged in its manifesto to save the taxpayer millions by ending the use of hotels for asylum seekers. But demand for short-term residential accommodation across all of the cohorts is going to remain over the coming years, given other pressures on housing supply and risks presented by global instability. I mean, the trouble is, whenever viewers hear about potential cuts to things like free school meals, they say, why do we cut the amount of money we spend on small children and we still maintain the amount that we spend on those who come here in small boats, or illegally or illegally.
It's because we don't process them quickly enough. Now, there was a huge backlog inherited from his lot. They were in the hotels, and getting them out isn't easy. I mean, that is the truth. You could turf everybody onto the streets if you like. You could do that. You could just say, right, let's kick them all out. And then I think people would sharply be criticising what was happening there in their towns and cities.
Yeah.
Ketamine, which a lot of people, when they hear that word, think of a horse tranquilizer, which, of course, it is how it was originally developed. It's sneaking up on this, basically. Figures that this programme got exclusively from King's College London yesterday shows that ketamine deaths in the UK hit a record high in 2023. There were 55 deaths, up from just 2 in 2003. So it's a growing problem, and we'll be talking to the mother who lost her teenage daughter to ketamine a bit later in the programme, who thinks it should absolutely now be categorised as a Class A drug, not a Class C drug. If you put Class A on it, it implies to kids that actually it's quite heavy, it's quite serious, rather than the way that they regard it currently, which is like a pocket money drug.
Yeah, I mean, there are shocking statistics on this. It's actually a Class B drug currently. What do you think, Kevin? I think a lot of people think, oh, I mean, ketamine, I sort of hear about it. It doesn't feel like it's as serious as heroin. And indeed, the number of deaths is far, far lower than those for heroin, which is 1,453. It's considered a party drug, but of course we know that it was implicated in the death of Matthew Perry, the Friends star, and the Drag Race star, the Vivienne, as well. Do we need to reconsider some classifications of drugs, or would the government be reluctant about that because it might criminalise a larger number of people than would save?
Well, if heroin's categorised A, and there's more than 1,000 deaths a year, ketamine's B, and there's 55, just over 1 a week. Look, making it A doesn't necessarily reduce the number of deaths. In truth, it's whether you have the police resources to actually go around and get whoever is dealing with it. And you'll have to make the choices. And if there are more dangerous drugs out there, that is where your resources would go to keep deaths down.
Interesting.
The numbers have gone up sharply, so I think we should be really worried about it.
Oh, we should be. Yeah. And it's not a world we're in, but other people take things that keeps changing. It used to be ecstasy. Yeah. I remember the big issue around ecstasy. Less so now. And in fact, in some ways, the way to stop young kids dying was to tell them with ecstasy was make sure you're hydrated and take water. You may say that's encouraging it, but it was stopping the deaths because of dehydration. I think
education is really important. And one of the things that kids don't really understand about ketamine is it can very quickly not only become addictive, it can absolutely destroy the bladder. And an awful lot of kids who are on ketamine and have been taking it for more than just a few weeks find that they become incontinent permanently.
There's a medical use for ketamine because it is used in hospices, certainly. I don't know what the wider NH, all controlled.
It's a sedative,
in a controlled way. But yes, I think if there's 55 deaths, it has to be, it has to be tackled.
Well, and that's gone up in the 20 years because in 2003 there were 2 deaths. So it's over that period of time, it has gone up. I mean, and if you had lost your daughter, as Tracy Marelli did, her 20-year-old daughter Sophie died from ketamine addiction, you would want to do whatever you could
to stop there being more traces.
Exactly. Exactly right. So we will talk to Tracy about her daughter, Sophie, in a little bit later in the programme. Meanwhile, a lot of people will cheer the fact that more money is going to go into potholes.
That one again.
Well, that one again,
it's
because
really important.
as people bounce over their pothole in the morning, they will think that one again. In fact, we spoke to Nigel Havers last week on the programme, huge TV star, and he had this message for the Transport Secretary. Let's have a listen.
Government constantly wastes money. It's time they stopped doing that and actually worked out how to deal with a whole range of issues which are really important. And you can't say potholes are not, because of course they are. They're really vital. People get killed because of it. People get injured because of it. That only makes more for the national health. I could go on, but I mean, come on, get a grip. Heidi Alexander, I hope you're listening to this. She's the Secretary of State for Transport. What is she doing about it?
Play that clip to her when she comes on at 8:30, and also ask her. I mean, the government's very proud of the fact that they're going to be spending 1.7 billion on potholes. Excuse me, the estimate is that they need to spend 17 billion. Almost 16 billion pounds more than they're promised.
It's decades of neglect, and it's a real problem. I mean, you've seen people like Rod Stewart fixing them outside his own home.
Yes, I saw that.
It's self-help.
Yes.
Like it's a long time underinvestment. It's got to be tackled. I think what the government is doing, the 1.7 billion you mentioned, is local authorities have to show they're filling potholes to get it all.
Yes, every year they have to declare what they've done to get the money.
I think is
but
good.
Are they repairing them properly? Because often, I know the pothole quite near where I live, they're fixing it every year because they don't fix it properly.
Yeah.
Well,
it's a temporary fix.
It takes longer and it's more expensive to fix it properly.
Exactly.
Which is why they're kind of patching the network, the road network. But no, it's a problem. I notice them when I drive now, and you notice them on motorways. I never saw them in the past.
Imagine if you were on a bike.
Exactly. Either you go through it, which is dangerous, or you quickly steer around it, which puts you in the path
all sorts
of
risk.
a car behind you.
You know, all these potholes are from your lot, by the way. You left them.
Did we never have potholes before?
I think there were far fewer. I think there were far fewer before 2010. You never found it as big an issue because roads were better maintained. And I think cutting capital investment, which the George Osborne did when he became Chancellor, was a huge error.
I think you'll find a lot of local authorities are responsible for potholes, many of which were run by Labour.
Well, something else that Nigel Havers wants answered is what's happening to our car tax money? Car tax money is supposed to go on maintaining the roads, but it seems to be being siphoned off into all sorts of other government
into black hole.
Yeah.
I'm not sure it's a hypothecated tax, which would mean that it is ring-fenced for a particular thing. I think everybody says, well, how come our road tax doesn't pay for roads? Because it is simply a tax which goes into the Treasury.
It's like national health insurance, isn't it? It just goes straight into the Treasury.
Or into local authorities. Yeah, exactly.
But you're right about temporary repairs. They are a complete false economy. We had major potholes on the road that I live on, and they were repaired, let me think, 5 months ago? Yeah. I've noticed 5 of them have reopened in a matter of weeks.
Yeah.
In a few minutes, just after 7 o'clock, we're going to talk to Mike Amesbury, who was a Labour MP until he punched a constituent. And he says he wakes up every morning regretting what he did. He was, he pleaded guilty to beating by assault after punching poor fellows in the early hours of October the 26th. We do have pictures, actually, of that assault to which he pleaded guilty, but we just have to put a warning out there if you don't want to watch them, because obviously...
It's pretty violent.
Yeah, here we go. OK, so here we go.
And the guy had his hands in his pockets, so it wasn't even as if he was physically threatening Amesbury.
And the trouble is, he punches him and then he continues to punch him.
Well, that's the problem. I think some people have been... Look, I don't know him very well, but I'm told he's a really nice, decent bloke. But if it had been the one punch, but then to carry on while he's on the ground...
Well, even one punch can kill.
Yeah, of course.
It's the guy's head.
If he hit the ground...
He's snapped. But Conservatives and Labour all say he's a nice, easygoing guy. For whatever reason, he's snapped, he's done that, and he's paid an incredibly high price for it. Because he's lost his job, he's
lost his reputation.
Briefly in prison, pictures at the weekend of him doing community payback work, painting a centre. No, he has, but you can't do that. Nobody can do that. No. Nobody can do that. Particularly if you're an MP.
Turn the clock back. He's desperate.
Well, he will. He will. But
that's 1 second.
That's good because he's paid an enormous price, and people people do snap, and I'd rather they regretted what they did than they were somehow defiant and attempted to justify it.
There'll be a by-election, and that's the last thing the Labour Party want at the moment, because they'll be under huge pressure to try and hold the seat.
He's going into a lot of detail about his ordeal, as it were, following this terrible mistake he made. Of course, he was sent to jail. He was let out on appeal, but he spent three days and 3 nights in jail, and he said that he would have really lost it had it not been for the old lags who were sharing his cell, who he said were extremely supportive and kind of metaphorically put an arm around his shoulders and sort of helped get him through it. So he's really been through the mill.
He has. And it's a lesson to us all. I mean, I thought he was going to become a government minister.
Yeah,
because he's very close to... He's great mates with Angela Rayner, the Deputy Prime Minister.
I feel sorry for him, but you can't do that and be an MP.
No, of course not.
No. You can't do that and not be punished for it.
Yes.
I think the question is how much punishment...
And do they have to punish MPs more severely than other people? Well, that's always a debate.
I think he got a showboating magistrate because it was quickly overturned, the jail sentence.
Because I was surprised he went to prison.
Yeah, he was surprised. He put his car on a metre outside the court. He was so expecting to walk.
But there'll be other people watching that saying anybody, not just an MP, anybody who attacks somebody like that should be sent to prison. That's how other people will feel because of the violence involved.
Oh my God, if that had happened to my son, I'd want the person responsible to go to prison. The former MP, Mike Amesbury, joins us now.
Morning.
Good morning to you.
Good morning.
The judge also ordered you to wear an alcohol tag because you had been drinking that night, hadn't you?
I have.
More than usual?
Yes, probably about 6 or 7 pints. I've been to 3 pubs. An empty stomach. It was a Friday. You will both know it's a busy day for members of Parliament, Friday with constituents and so forth. And I think I had soup that day, so it was an empty stomach. And yes, so... the judge, this was on appeal, made a decision to use an alcohol tag.
We can just see it on your left ankle there, if we just get a camera onto it, because it's a large tag, isn't it? And how does that work?
I've got this on it's 120 days, and I think every half hour it measures your sweat, and it's 0 alcohol intake in that 120 days, but, I intend to go beyond 120 days. So.
For someone who's never been in trouble before, was a respected MP, we've heard from colleagues today that you're very well liked in the House of Commons. Nobody's got a bad word to say about you. This must seem surreal, that you're sitting here on television talking about having to wear an alcohol detector tag. We're going to be asking you about what it was like to go to jail for 3 days.
Yes.
It must seem unreal to you.
It does. It's a living nightmare, but it's a nightmare that I created. I obviously pleaded guilty at the first stage in the legal process. I own that, so I'm being punished, and rightfully so.
And when you look back at that moment, and you've seen it so many times, we all have now, with hindsight, can you describe to us what was going through your mind? What was the change in you? 1 minute you're talking to the guy, he's got his hands in his pockets, he's not threatening you, and the next you've decked him. What happened in that moment?
I mean, I'll add some context, certainly not excuses. It's been a tough time in Parliament. Ironically, since we, I say we, I'm not a member of the Labour Party anymore, but since we entered government, and I was a very public-facing, community-connected member of Parliament, but it was, you were getting, whether it's winter fuel, whether it's other issues as well, people quite vexed. I did have a stalker. I've still got a stalker. He turned up to my plea hearing. He's been prosecuted. And it does make you somewhat anxious. Lots of members of Parliament got personal alarms on them and so forth. Mr. Fellows, he was somewhat vexed about, I think it was a local bridge. I think he mentioned winter fuel as well. There was a number of things. And, I did feel personally threatened at that time. And I made an instantaneous judgment call, which was wrong. Absolutely. I should have walked away.
I thought you'd say something like this. He was basically the wrong guy in the wrong place at the wrong time, wasn't he? He represented all the frustrations and the resentments which had built up in you as an MP who's constantly poked at and criticised and verbally jabbed. And then in that moment, this guy represented all of that, and you lashed out.
Yes, reflect on that, then yes. I mean, I was to get a taxi. I mean, 2:10 in the morning, it's incredibly rare. I couldn't even count on one hand, you know, in the last 8 years, nearly 8 years, I was a Member of Parliament for the patch. And yeah, I just, like a lot of people at that taxi rank, just wanted to get a taxi and go home. And then obviously I was identified as the local MP. You know, so while I'm not working, you're always, you will know yourselves as celebrities, you are kind of always on duty. I should have known better. I've made so many mistakes that night, and it's not only changed my life, it's changed the lives of so many people around me.
The person that you punched, Paul Fellows,
yes,
said he could have been killed. Yeah. We know that one punch can kill.
Yes.
He said you deserve to be in prison. You should never have been let out so early. He doesn't think that justice has been served. Mm. Have you had any contact with him? Do you want to have contact with him?
Yes, I've said to the probation service, this was pre-sentencing, I've said since that in mediation, you know, I will once again publicly apologise to Mr. Fellows and his family. Very importantly, my family as well, because it's affected them. My former constituents and neighbours and friends, I live in the community still. And parliamentary colleagues as well, you know, have been very kind about me. Certainly not supportive of my actions on that evening. But
can I just say, I can see that you are personally broken by
yes.
what's happened. You've lost your career as an MP, and you've lost your ambitions and your hopes for the future, as it would have been.
Yes.
But there will be people watching who think you're not the victim here.
I'm definitely not.
And it is never... You might have an explanation for what happened, but there is never justification for turning to violence.
Yes.
You didn't just punch him, you punched him when he was on the ground as well, when he was completely defenceless at that point.
Yes.
What would you say, and what will you do now? Because if that was my son you'd punched, I'd want you in prison. Mm. I'd want you to do more than 3 nights in a cell. Mm. It's kind of horrifying to watch. I understand that it's had a massive impact on you, but I don't know what you do now in order to make it better. Yes,
well, I'm a living visual example of the consequences. Consequences of using violence, of seeing red in those moments of madness. And you're right, there for the grace of God that Mr. Fellows didn't bang his head on the floor and kill him. The charity one punch is exactly right. It's something I recognise. You know, 55 years on this planet, nearly 56. I've never been in trouble with the police before.
Do you think the drink, the fact you'd had 6 pints, did that make it worse? Did that make you less able to control yourself when you were, you know, when a constituent came up to you at that time of the morning?
Undoubtedly.
Yeah. And does that make you want... Obviously, you've got the tag on, but does that make you want to stop drinking?
Yes. Yeah. Yes. So it was... you know, if I had an issue, it's probably around binge drinking. So every now and again, you know, it's one of those... What little hair I've got, you know, let my hair down. Quite stressful and things at the time. But, yeah, I mean... At the beginning of this piece here, this interview, he showed the video and said, viewers will find this distressing. It's me, but I don't recognise myself, and I find it quite traumatic, and I've had to watch that over and over again, and rightfully so.
Just one more question before we close this. You and your lawyers did not expect you to go to jail, so much so that you left your car on a meter outside.
Did, yes. Yeah.
Didn't bring a bag to court with you, and the next minute you're in a van on the way to the prison. And you say that the shock was intense, but actually it was a couple of old lags in your cell who, metaphorically speaking, kind of put their arms around you and got you through it. Is that right?
They did. They were a godsend. You know, that how, again, it just felt surreal. You know, I've never been in a prison before.
You didn't sleep, did you?
No, I didn't sleep for 3 nights. But actually, it was a helping hand, really, on that first night in particular, and they did. They looked after me throughout, as did other inmates as well. I mean, I had a perception of prison, and of course, I've been all over the TV, and there are, you know, small portable TVs in. I was free to the cell on the first night. We should pay rent on those TVs, by the way, they're not. But yes, I mean, everybody had seen me, and it was that. You know, obviously, I was incredibly anxious about that. But
and they were supportive.
People were.
Very quickly, next year, what will you be doing? Career?
I really don't know. But
no idea.
Out of what I did wrong, fundamentally wrong, you know, I've been punished through the legal system, but certainly well beyond that, you know, I've lost a job, but it was also a calling. It was more than a job for me as a member of Parliament. The family home's now on the market, so we're losing the home. And I don't know. I don't know what comes next at the moment, but I know that I've got to. I own this, but do some good from it. Do some good from it, really.
Mike Amesbury, thank you for your time this morning.
You might have heard of ketamine as a horse tranquilizer, but it's also increasingly being used as a party drug. And recently it was named as a contributing factor in the deaths of the drag racers, the Vivienne, and Friends star Matthew Perry. And the Class B drug is now claiming the lives of more people than ever before in Britain. Figures obtained by this programme can reveal this morning. And one of those deaths was 20-year-old Sophie Russell, who first took ketamine on a night out with her friends, but she quickly became addicted, suffered severe weight loss and agonising pain. And 2 years after she first tried ketamine, Sophie died from a cardiac arrest caused by her addiction back in September last year. Well, Sophie's mother, Tracy Marelli, joins us now alongside Father Alex Frost, who's kind of at the front line of this. He runs a support group for patients of ketamine users and has some chilling stories to tell us. But let's start with you first of all, Tracy. Ketamine, for a long time, has had this reputation as a kind of a pocket money drug. You know, kids take it in the park and on the way home from school and stuff. And it's a Class B drug. It's not all that dangerous. And as we're beginning to discover, it's incredibly dangerous. It's not just incredibly addictive. The side effects that it causes once it gets a grip on people are horrendous. And it, as we've heard, it kills. You lost your lovely daughter to it. Just tell us what happened. Just take us through what happened with Sophie, how it began and how it finished.
Yes, so Sophie was a very lively normal teenage girl that just wanted to live life to the full. She was socialising all the time. I couldn't get her in, to be fair. But yes, little signs sort of picked up. I used to ring her. We used to stay in touch quite a lot. She would be slurring her words, and I thought, oh, she's probably had a drink. I then would ring her an hour later for something else different, just to check up on her, and she was fine. And obviously this kept happening, and I just thought, this isn't right. And then I didn't think at the time, but she used to come back home with bruising, a lot of bruising. It wasn't just one bruise, a lot of bruising. And now I think back, maybe this is when she used to fall over or just didn't have control of her body. But yes, it destroyed her, and it didn't take long.
2 years, we've said.
2 years, yeah.
She lost control of her bladder, didn't she?
She did. She did have a weak bladder as a child before this. So, yeah, she was in adult pull-ups for well over a year, and the pain was excruciating. She walked around with a hot water bottle, a 2-litre bottle of water, because she constantly had to have water in the system.
Because ketamine destroys the lining of the bladder, doesn't it?
Yes.
Permanently.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it is. Yeah, permanently. I don't think young children realise the damage it does cause to their body. They think they're having a fantastic time on this drug, but they need to start thinking what they're doing permanently damaged.
She lost what looked like about half her body weight.
She did, very quickly. Yeah. Again, looking back, I thought she was quite big-built girl. She was a good 14, 16. I thought, 'cause she's at that age, girls' bodies change. But yeah, we did go to the doctors for the weight loss, but nothing was really picked up.
She became addicted to ketamine. And how open was she with you about her addiction?
So I found out, she told me it was after Christmas time. I think there was a lot of, obviously, parties around that time. I found out by finding sort of residue in a bedroom after her friends had been in the room. And she told me, yes, I'm taking ketamine. And she'd already sourced out support by herself. But at this point, I think some of her friends had sourced out support, so she sort of followed.
But it didn't help?
No, it didn't help her, no.
Well, we say that from beginning to the end, it was 2 years, and I know it's incredibly painful for you. But just take us through her final days.
Wow. Her mental health was unbelievable. She went from such a confident, knowing what she wanted to do in life, to a mess, anxiety. She couldn't think for herself. She said her head felt like mash. So that drug destroyed her brain. And yeah, I mean, she went backwards and forwards to her father's house for a bath because it was a source of
comfort,
relief,
and
pain relief, the hot bath.
Yeah.
And she just took herself to bed. And I didn't hear for a while from her because I texted her and ring her, nothing. And I said to Dad the following morning, can you just check up on her? I'm really worried. I was at work at the time, and yeah, a phone call. She'd passed away.
Oh, my goodness.
So I do believe she passed away in her sleep because the way she was found, sort of curled up with a hot water bottle. So that gives me sort of comfort knowing she just passed away in her sleep.
Her heart gave out.
Yes, her heart did give out, yeah.
I'm so sorry, honestly. It's devastating.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot more stories, and not just Sophie stories.
I know.
There's so much more stories.
Well, two very high-profile stories in the headlines.
Yes.
The Vivian from RuPaul's Drag Race and Matthew Perry. So we know, Father Alex, that ketamine can kill. And the numbers in the 20 years between 2003 and 2023 went from 2 deaths to 55 deaths. When you talk to parents, what advice do you give them? Because there's a lot of young people taking ketamine, and I think a lot of parents might be surprised to know, actually, it's probably more common than they think, might be closer to home than they think.
Yeah. Well, I'm not an expert. You know, I feel like I've become an expert. I feel like I've been filling gaps where the state and NHS and social services should be filling those gaps.
Because you're at a church in Burnley running this support group, aren't you?
Yeah, and originally it was one person who told me that their 15-year-old son was using and dealing ketamine. And I thought it was perhaps an isolated incident. Then I reached out to the community on social media, and the response was incredible. Hundreds of people, you know. At first, somebody said it's not just one person, it's hundreds of people. And then I started hearing some really horrific stories. 12-year-old girl addicted to ketamine. A young girl who had created a business plan to be Burnley's best ketamine dealer in 2 years. She'd planned the runners, the dealers,
oh my goodness,
where she was going to get it from. And it's, sorry, I'm a bit emotional because that's such a moving story, but it's so multi-layered, this. This is not just about the child using ketamine, it's about the infrastructure to support people that are using ketamine. It's about the treatment of a child who is addicted to ketamine. And in my understanding, it's just talking therapies. There's no detox or rehab programme in the system. It's really poor.
Can I ask, because it's currently classified as Class B, do you think, Tracy, that gives the wrong impression about the devastating effects that ketamine has on children?
Yes, I don't think it's... I think they see it as a medicine and it won't harm me. Yeah, so...
So if it was Class A?
If it was... I think, yeah, if it was Class A, I would definitely think they would think twice. I think police would have more control over this drug, more punishment...
And more education.
More education.
To challenge this assumption that so many kids have, as you say, that it's basically harmless, gives you a quick high and that's that. And it's not.
No, there's been no review of it since 2014. And I know the government are looking at it, but, you know, my own MP told me that we should leave it to the experts. Well, he's an expert.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
well,
listen
2 deaths in 2003, 55 deaths in 2020.
And ITV reported an 85% increase in the last 12 months among young people using ketamine.
Right.
So if that's not a warning sign, what is?
Tracy, what would you say to young people watching this morning saying it's not going to happen to me?
It's just not worth the risk. Don't destroy your body over a night out. You destroy families around it, your family, think of your family. Yeah, there's other ways to have a good time. Just walk away.
Have the courage to do that?
Yeah.
So that another mum doesn't have to have the courage to come in and speak on television about the loss of their child. Thank you for doing that. It's such an important message. And, you know, all our love to you, because I know there's nothing worse. There is nothing worse than losing your child, and I'm so, so sorry about what happened to you, Father Alex. Keep doing the great work that you're doing.
Thank you.
And we'll find out what the government does about it. I know that the Minister for Crime and Policing, Dame Diana Johnson, said, you know, her thoughts, of course, are with you. And she's deeply concerned by the recent rise in the use of ketamine. And that's why she's written to the Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, asking them about considering reclassifying it. So watch this space. Thank you.
Fingers crossed.
Thank you both. Fix your potholes or lose out on the cash to do it. That's the government's warning to local councils as they prepare to hand out £1.6 billion that's been earmarked for road repairs.
But critics, such as the actor Nigel Havers, are worried that's not enough. Here's what he wanted to say to the Transport Secretary when we spoke to him last week.
Government constantly wastes money. It's time they stopped doing that and actually worked out how to deal with a whole range of issues which are really important. And you can't say potholes are not, because of course they are. They're really vital. People get killed because of it. People get injured because of it. That only makes more for the national health. I could go on, but I mean, come on, get a grip. Heidi Alexander, I hope you're listening to this. She's the Secretary of State for Transport. What is she doing about it?
Well, serendipity, because here, able, we hope, to answer Nigel's question is the Transport Secretary, Heidi Alexander. Good morning, Ms Alexander. It's a tricky one for you, this, because the asphalt industry itself has been saying for the last couple of weeks that this £1.6 billion that you've allocated to filling in potholes around the country won't, to use a phrase, touch the sides. You need to spend at least £17 billion, many, many times more. You're not going to come up with that kind of money, are you?
So I'm not pretending that the money that we announced just before Christmas is going to be able to fix every pothole on every road in every county of the country. But what we are doing is making a record amount of investment. That £1.6 billion is £500 million more than local councils got from central government last year. That's roughly a 40% increase. And if it was all used on fixing potholes, that would equate to 7 million more potholes being filled next year. But listening to what Nigel Havers was saying, he is right to say that we need to get value for money in the way that we spend this money. And that is precisely why the Prime Minister and I are today announcing new measures to tackle the potholes that have, let's be honest, plagued Britain's road users for far too long. We will require councils to set out how they are using the money. It may be that proactive road resurfacing is the right thing to do in particular locations. That might represent the best value for money. We also know that it can be really frustrating for people to see road contractors come out, do a bodge job on a pothole, then have to come back 2 months later to do exactly the same piece of work because the contract hasn't been managed properly. That's why we need to know from local authorities how they are spending their money. If they get that report up in the summer on their website so that public can see how the money is being spent, and if they provide a little bit more technical information to us in the autumn, that will then unlock the final quarterly payment of the money that they have been allocated. And I think it's reasonable for government, when we're making a record level of investment like this, to ask councils to demonstrate to us that they're spending that money really wisely.
It's certainly true to say that the temporary repairs that you refer to there are undoubtedly a false economy, because they just have to come back a few weeks or months later and do the same job again. A lot of our viewers want to know the answer to this question. Why doesn't the road tax, which we all have to pay if we drive a car, why doesn't that go towards filling in these potholes?
So in terms of road tax and the accounts that goes into in government, the really critical thing is that the allocations that we are making are commensurate to the size of the challenge. And over the last decade of the Conservative government, who didn't prioritise this, we had the nation's roads in a real state. They became a bit of a symbol of decline. That's why, within 6 or 7 months of us taking office, we made this issue a priority.
Sorry, I don't think that's the answer to Richard's question.
Councils are getting by 500 million.
Yeah, but why doesn't road tax get ring-fenced and put directly into our roads?
So generally, as a government, we don't hypothecate taxation. There are a whole set of different issues, public services that need to be provided, and we collect taxes, we raise money, and then we work out, the Chancellor works out in the budget and through a spending review how to allocate those resources. Okay. The point that I am making is that this is very much significantly more than the last Conservative government were spending on road repairs. And the reason we're doing that is because at the last general election, we promised change. We've got a plan for change here, and we know that having roads which can operate reliably, smoothly, safely is really, really important to the public, and that's why we are prioritising it.
Yeah. As it is important that Heathrow Airport operates smoothly and reliably. Now, what are the answers that you, as the Transport Secretary, have got on why one substation fire closed down Europe's busiest airport? And whose side are you on in the blame game that's going on? Because the National Grid says there was more than enough power to keep the airport open.
So what happened on Thursday night, the early hours of Friday morning last week, was really unprecedented, and it was a very significant incident. And I would just like to say thank you to the 70 firefighters who put out that blaze, and also the staff at National Grid and Heathrow, who worked quickly to get flights landing again at Heathrow within about 18 hours of the flights starting. Now, I spoke to the Chief Executive of Heathrow on Friday morning. He told me that whilst the airport has multiple power supplies, the extent of the disruption caused by the fire at the substation was such that they had to reconfigure the power supplies in the airport. There were particular problems, I was told, at Terminals 2 and 4. They do have backup energy systems. Those systems are designed to protect the critical key bits of systems within the airport, not to power the entire airport. When I spoke to the Chief Executive on Friday morning, he told me that that type of backup arrangement was typical for airports of that size.
Okay, but
now,
hang
the
on
airport
a moment.
itself is commissioning a review. Yeah, and so what they had to do was turn all the systems off, Susanna. Let me make this point because I think it's an important one. Yeah. They had to turn all the systems off. They then had to restart them, reboot them, and ensure that they were operating safely. They were able to get some flights landing from about 4 o'clock. And obviously, I'm pleased that the airport was running on Saturday and Sunday as normal. I do recognise that there will be thousands of people who had to put their travel plans on hold and who have experienced, significant disruption and distress. But so, I will be looking also very carefully at the report that Heathrow have commissioned themselves.
Yeah, so apparently there's a slight delay on the line. There were 2 substations available. So is the issue no longer that there wasn't power? The issue is that Heathrow didn't have the ability to switch to those other substations?
So the power had to be reconfigured, is what I understand, and that they then had to shut down all of their systems and safely restart. And, I would just say that when you're running a big piece of transport infrastructure, safely restarting systems and doing all that testing does take some time.
But do you think that they panicked?
To close the airport,
the decision to... it was a panicked decision? Because let's face it, the boss of Heathrow went to bed just after midnight as the fire was taking hold and deputised the decision as to whether or not to close the airport to his deputy. And it was the deputy who made the decision. And the question that we're really asking now is, was that a bad decision? For all you may have been told about the difficulties of rebooting and all the rest of it, would it not have been possible much, much more quickly to switch across to one of the other 2 substations, which the national grid implies it would have been a relatively simple operation, and got Heathrow up and running again by breakfast time?
I'm not privy to all the information that the senior leadership team at Heathrow Airport had available to them at midnight on Thursday night going into Friday morning. I'm not going to second-guess, as the Transport Secretary, the judgments that a private company, a transport operator, has taken. I am, though, very interested in the review that the Heathrow Board have commissioned into their response and their resilience plans and the recovery from this incident.
Were you surprised
I
that
would
the boss
also
went
say
to
that
bed?
government has instructed...
Were you surprised that the boss went to bed? Were you surprised?
I don't know what led to that. I don't know what led to that decision. I was told that the chief operating officer.
But Heidi Alexander, you may have not known what led to him going to bed and putting the light out, but were you surprised when you learned that he'd gone to bed?
So I've had experience of running transport infrastructure in the past, and one of the most important things you can have in a moment of crisis is a really important team. And if he had trust in the chief operating officer to take that decision, and if his judgment was that he was going to have a whole number of critical decisions to be taken in the following 24 hours, then, I'm not going to second guess why he came to the conclusion that that was the right thing for him to do. What I'm interested in doing now, though, Richard, is making sure that we learn the lessons, that we've got energy resilience in place when it comes to our critical national infrastructure. I've asked to see the output from the Heathrow internal review, and the Energy Secretary, Ed Miliband, and I will be looking very carefully at the report that we have commissioned from an organisation called NESO, which is the National Energy Systems Operator.
Thank you.
And they are due to be reporting back to us in early May.
Heidi Alexander, thank you.